Welcome to View from Left Field, where we analyze and discuss the weekly news. I'm your host, Will, and today we'll be talking about rallies and ongoing actions that have been happening the last couple weeks, as well as Donald Trump's tariffs and their effect on the economy. On our panel today, we have Jerry
Hey everyone, long time no here.
and Saumya.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, so unfortunately, a couple weeks ago we were set to record, and we actually ended up postponing because it fell on the same day. If people weren't able to attend or didn't know about it, the National Association of Letter Carriers was hosting an event across the country, um, basically protesting the attempt at privatizing USPS. So a few of us ended up going to our local events and supporting those. So, Jerry, I think you went to one as well. You want to just talk a couple minutes about the
Oh,
event you went to and how that went?
which one? The
The
one
NALC one.
oh, okay, the NALC one. So that was the US Postal Workers unions, and it was sponsored by them, but I always get confused with all the union acronyms. I'm not as well informed as some people like Will are. But it wasn't just, I found this out, it wasn't just the NALC, that there are other unions there that were being represented. And they also represent mail carriers and workers, whether they be the staff at the offices that you go to, or the carriers, or the drivers, or anyone that was related. Yeah, it was a very big following here in Kansas City, and we found we had a lot of good speeches, and the best thing I got from it is I didn't know, for one, like, a lot of seniors get their life-saving medicine from the U.S. Postal Service, and that countries trying to privatize their own mail service, and how much of a nightmare disaster it was. For instance, in the UK, they tried to do that with their, I think they call it like their Royal Postal Service or something, and it was a huge, huge problem. It did not pan out the way that the free market was supposed to pan out for them. And I think that was what I got, because I interviewed someone who was a president of one of the locals, and she said, I think the most important thing that we're doing here is educating the public about the Postal Service. And I find that when we see, I mean, the mass media is not going to cover this stuff, even though they will play some platitudes to the U.S. Postal Service. I think they obviously are showing more footage of Elon Musk, with a chainsaw, or Donald Trump, I don't know, putting tariffs on islands with only penguins on it and stuff like that. They're not going to focus on the actual, and it's not that complicated, like just these, how the Postal Service actually functions and works. And I think there were a lot of union representatives there, but I'm not in a postal service union. I was there, and there were a lot of people there supportive. So I think, if anything, people will argue, how important are rallies? This wasn't a strike. How important are protests? I think there is a point to them, and I think it's important to make connections with people. Sure, and it might be good for your own personal health to find people that are like-minded, so you just don't think you're crazy, and that it's just you thinking that what's happening is a big threat, and maybe it's not like the sky's falling, this is actually happening. But I think you also start to build something like a coalition. You have those opportunities there. And so then they had the U.S. House of Representatives, Congressman Emmanuel Cleaver speak, and God, that guy is, I mean, I'll give him this. That guy has to be like 90. And he was very animate and like, he knew the right things to say. He's not great. He's been here for two ever. He's very much like an establishment, like Democrat. But he did have a good speech, I think, that defended the U.S. Postal Service. But I think that's a win. To fact just have representatives on that issue show their support. Whether they on other issues they're terrible. So it was good, and they got a lot of it didn't get as much media coverage as I would like, but I know that Labor Today was posting a lot of articles about it, which is a great news source that we should promote. And so I think that's it was worth doing. But I mean, I'm going on a bit there. Uh, Hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, so I ended up going to a rally as well, and for anyone who may not have been at a rally or couldn't go to one, Jerry mentioned it was more than just the NALC there. So there was the APWU. I don't know what the acronym stands for, but I believe those are clerks that work at the mail offices. And then we had a rural carrier as well, because if people also don't know, rural carriers have their own union separate from the NALC. At least where I am, they have a separate union. So the NALC just deals with letter carriers in the city, and then the rural carriers have their own union. But yeah, I went to mine, and it was a really good event. I actually got some papers a couple days before the event, and I got this from a letter carrier, and it was, I don't know if we want to call it a memo or what, but it was put out by Wells Fargo, I think late February, and basically Wells Fargo was putting together this plan of what privatizing the USPS looks like. And so that's kind of what I based. I ended up speaking on my event, and that's what I based a lot of my speech around, because that's what they asked me to speak on. And it's kind of wild that, especially Wells Fargo, I mean, they put together this whole plan. They say, okay, USPS gets privatized. They say USPS needs to be profitable. They need to raise their prices 40 to 130% is what they said in there. They said that the pensions basically need to get offloaded. They said they're a liability. And it was
Those retirements are liabilities.
And they also called something else healthcare liabilities too. It's like, oh, I'm sorry that people want healthcare. Like, I don't know. Like the wording in it was very like cruel. But so yeah, they had this whole framework basically that they came up with on what privatizing would look like. The biggest piece of their document is that they said, hey, look, USPS has all of this land, and I think they evaluated it at like $85 billion worth of land that all the postal services sit on across the country. And they said, we really need to get a hold of that land. And I assume they want to, rent it up, lease it out, whatever. But that was the biggest thing that they were like just chomping at the bit to get. They repeated it over and over. They're like, look at how much real estate USPS has. We need to get a hold of that, and we need to do something with it.
But don't you want like McDonald's in your postal service?
Right, exactly.
You get a hamburger and deliver your meds to grandma. I great.
Yeah. But to follow up what Jerry said too, there were some things that I did not know about the Postal Service that I learned, such as the Postal Service has a 6-day guarantee that if you send a package, it will get anywhere in the 50 states within 6 days. So that even means Hawaii and Alaska. They it has to get there within 6 days, which of course under privatization, who knows how long a package would take to get to like Hawaii. Like, good luck kind of thing, right? Or if it gets there in 6 days, it's going to cost you $200 or, something like that, something astronomical. So yeah, it was very good. We had I think about 100 people show up to our rally, which was good for for I think the rally in general. For a city of 250,000 people, about 100 is pretty good.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was what I went to, and I don't know if anyone went to the rally yesterday around the country, the hands off rally. I did not get to go to mine. I've been sick for going on a week now. It's been kind of crazy. So I decided to just stay home and rest. And this is an unbelievable number to me, but I was told that there were 5,000 people at our rally in town, apparently,
Yeah.
which, I mean,
Was there just one? Because there were multiple, it's not a big city here, but there could have been multiple as well.
there were a couple around the state. There was one on like the other side of the state. So I don't know how big those ones were, but yeah, 5,000 people for a rally of that. I mean, again, protests around here, I feel a protest, you're lucky to get like 50 people on normal. If you get 50 people, that's a success. So 5,000 kind of blows my mind that many people showed up, but I can believe it. So, yeah,
I think it was a positive development, I would say. I remember, last time we had the orange president here in administration, we had these rallies. We can remember the Me Too movement. Do think it's an extension of that. However, I do see more of a labor oriented group of people. Like I saw the NALC people there at this strike, at this protest or rally. And I think that is a win for us because there were, I would say a lot of interesting different signs that were there. I saw some good ones. I saw some great ones, and I saw a few bad ones. And I think the bad ones usually stick out the most. But overall, I think it's a positive thing to influence those kinds of movements because I think we were discussing earlier, we don't see the leadership. Who is going to lead this movement? It's probably, I mean, the Democratic Party would love to lead it. I mean, Cory Booker, I mean, I guess kudos to his bladder, but I don't really know if I mean, he's going to probably run for president. But the Democratic Party, as time and time again, people have amnesia about that too. They fail us on defending democracy. They've led to this to happen. They could have done so much under Biden, codify Roe v. Wade. They could have done more to pass the Build Back Better bill, and it's we know why they kind of just cater towards the more establishment and the undoing of democracy. That I would argue the fascist administration or the Trump administration. That was a bit of a Freudian slip there, but sure, it is fascist in a lot of respects. Is dismantling or government and or democracy. I do think that's true. And I think that was the message that was being sent. And it was a lot of people. I saw people from work there, which was great. I also made a lot of connections with people. There were veterans groups like Veterans for Peace. I saw them and I told them who I was and they want to make more connections. Like I said, there was unions there. If you just stop your politics at protesting, then maybe that's good for your, in my opinion, mental health. But we can't stop there. It's another tool. It's a way to organize, to meet people, and I see that as being not so much a referendum like Trump, because I think some people like to think that it is, but to show that we can organize. That's maybe the first step, is showing that we want a referendum. But now we have to actually make a step in the right direction, which is to get organized and lead this, attack on our democracy. Point out who the instigators are. And as they say, it's the oligarchs. I think Bernie Sanders and AOC, while they're not great on everything, are doing a service with this oligarchy tour, that they're pointing out who are the real instigators or real enemies. It's not necessarily the Republican Party, though they definitely are a tool that these instigators use. It's the oligarchs. But the oligarchs also use the Democratic Party to some extent. They know they can get away with more with Trump. And we can get into the tariffs later, and I think that's what I see some good push towards. Now, we just have to do a bit more educating. I was handing out some propaganda too, but yeah, because I did see some really, really bad sides. I think I saw one where it had, America or Trump wants you to worry about transgenders. So he he wants to make you worry about trans people because he wants the USA to transition into the USSR. And I'm like, well, wait, that's what's wrong with that?
Yeah. Yeah. That makes no sense. uh,
Speaking of educating, I've heard people who think and people who like go out and protest and think of that as like that's activism. That's what activism is. What exactly does it mean to get organized? Because I've talked to friends of mine who thought that like the Black Lives Matter campaign was organized, whereas we know that it was actually not very organized at all. So, what exactly does that mean? I feel like a lot of people don't actually know what activism is or what it means to get organized.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have a Martin Luther King like we did in the civil rights. We don't have a communist party like we did in the 40s, in the 30s. We like to point to some groups. I would say, like Black Lives Matter. I would even argue like and I think Jewish Voice for Peace kind of has led in the struggle for Palestinian rights and the genocide that's happening against them in Gaza. Um, but it never, in fact, I was surprised by that. I saw a lot of Ukrainian flags, but I did not see any Palestinian flags. And it kind of dawned on me because it's there's no one leading that movement. And so, when we think of Trump, we think of Russia and then we think of Ukraine. But have people forgotten how he's actually he's intensified what is happening in Gaza today. He's given it full, and Biden was horrible. But if people are saying that Trump is better, I think they need a reality check. Trump has been worse in this respect on the war in Gaza. And I didn't see any Palestinian flags. And I was just thinking, because there's no leading group. There's no Martin Luther King. There's no Communist Party leading them. And I think that is what's lacking. But this is, showing that we're taking a step in the right direction, at least. We just have to, now do the hard work. And hopefully some people are activated by it. I know, to be fair, I was activated more after Trump got elected. So that if there are more Jerrys and Samyas and Wills, because I know we're all very busy with work, then it's a win. But it's like this is an opportunity for us also to lead those people that are sick of this. But yeah, I mean, and we don't. I just yeah, I think this is a positive. I think some people go as far to say like, well, I think we were discussing this, like, well, this is what they deserve. Like the people that voted for Trump, they got what they wanted, and this is it. And they kind of just check out like it was just like a game to them. And I think it's important for us to push back against that. Like that's just, I'm gonna say it's just as bad, but like how unhelpful that whole mindset is. Um, it's mind-numbing actually, because it's just so ineffective and unhelpful. Yeah, I don't know what everyone else thinks about organizing, how we get there. If we can pull from history, and I've mentioned the civil rights. There was also the Vietnam War and like the student protests that were happening along with other groups that were protesting the Vietnam War. And we did, we wonder how effective that was. But to some extent, I think it was. I don't know, Samia, what would you say you've experienced in the past few months and with what's been happening with people around you?
Yeah, I feel like honestly, like the people who I'm around, I live in a pretty much like a liberal bubble in the state of New York. So I feel like the people who I'm personally around, they kind of like lost hope,
Hmm.
which is unfortunate. I do hear some of my friends, like one of them was like, well, you know, it really sucks that this is how the election outcome was with Trump. But you know what? Next time, instead of, you know, just voting and then complaining about it, I'm going to actually like go and do something. She's still like very much like hard like with the Democrats, but I appreciate her attitude of like next time I'm actually going to put in an effort and be more involved politically to make a difference. Because I've seen too many people around me who are not necessarily involved in any groups, like any sort of political groups. They mostly vote and, talk about politics. But that's about the extent to where, and when it comes to our administration currently, I mean, I know someone who at my work, she's great, but like has been she was like she's a bit older, so she's gone through like Vietnam. She would tell us about like how her brother almost got drafted and she was out there like protesting.
Hmm.
But even she has this attitude of like, yeah, that was the days where I was like able to go out and protest, and now I'm just kind of done with all of that.
Yeah.
Um, so unfortunately, I feel like I've seen a lot of people who are just kind of demoralized and
I
they don't want to talk about it.
I agree. They do, to the extent that they find what's on the TV, just like what Trump is doing, quite vile, and they're sick of looking at it. I mean, trust me, I am too. And I think they want someone to lead. And so, like I said, I think I mentioned like Cory Booker going up and doing a filibuster, and I can't remember what it was on, but then he, does it. He has his stands up and doesn't go to the bathroom for 25 hours, and then he just votes afterwards, like we were saying, votes to send weapons to Israel right afterwards. But at least he did something, people will tell me. And okay, good. But that's what they're seeing though, is like this media narrative that this is the resistance. And I did see a lot of, resistance, and Cory Booker and what's her name? The Ginsburg, the
Oh,
Supreme
Ruth
Court.
Bader Ginsburg.
Yeah, like pictures of
Yeah.
her. And it's like, right, like this is the resistance. Like I think it's just like we gotta find the people that are more interested than just that, and educate them. Because I also heard things like, I do think fascism is it's here, and we have to know what fascism is so we can actually identify it. What people have told me, I were discussing this with someone who I saw at the protest too. She was saying like all these things that are happening that like Elon Musk are doing with, or federal bodies, and dismantling like a lot of the operations of the government, like when it comes to Social Security and Medicare, and all these other departments. Bad, but we're not going to let it get to fascism, because people knew what like Hitler did. And they saw that he, caused the Holocaust. I mean, looking from hindsight, we won't allow another Hitler to appear. But Hitler's, rise to power is not the same way that Mussolini rose to power. Not exactly the same. There are the patterns that I would say are anti-labor, anti-communist, and finds scapegoats to basically pit people against each other. And those are like elements that fascism uses, but it's not going to appear that same way in an American context. And so, I had to tell her like I I'm pretty sure Americans are forgetting that. I didn't want to like question. I wanted to be positive and just tell her like we have to, people are forgetting about the Holocaust. People don't study the history about fascism, and I think that has to be a goal in all of our work is what is fascism, because people will equate like Putin to fascists, and I saw a lot of like pictures there of Putin with like a Hitler mustache. And while I do think Putin has his own nationalistic agenda that's not good, I don't think he's a fascist. Now you're talking about trying to make an argument one way or the other, but I mean, it's a little bit more nuanced to that. So it's really finding people where they stand. People are organized. There were a lot of people there for abortion rights and the attack on women, and not just women, but all LGBT plus rights. There are people that were labor oriented. There were people against war. And then you find people where they are. I just think that that's the way to go. If there's anything else you had on that, Samya?
Yeah, I could definitely see like appealing to the particular things that people are more passionate about is definitely more effective. It kind of seems like doom and gloom if you're like we need to defend like our democracy and like we're at risk of, going down the path of fascism. Yeah, that can be very demoralizing. But if you, try to appeal to what they personally care about, what they would actually, go out and um attend a meeting for or attend a protest for, then I feel like it might be an easier way to kind of like reach them and slowly like introduce that concept to them. And then I think the other thing is a lot of people feel demoralized because they're not actually like involved in anything. I feel like personally when Trump was last elected, I felt very demoralized, and that was because I wasn't involved in anything back then. I just felt like kind of helpless. However, this time around, it's not that same kind of feeling. And I definitely see that with other people who I know who are involved in other groups. They don't feel as they know they understand the seriousness, but they don't feel as demoralized as people who I know who are not involved in anything. And it's hard to explain that to people without being like, "Oh, you should do something."
Mm-hmm.
And making them feel bad about that. But that really is the way to kind of like fight against that feeling of helplessness and be able to do something about it.
Right. I think people are, thanks for sure. I think people are looking for shortcuts too. And so when they see something as big as Black Lives Matter, or like what Jewish Voice for Peace are doing, or even like this protest yesterday, they see something great and it's something to latch onto. And then it doesn't ever evolve into anything besides that. I hope that actually, the silver lining with that, of course, and Trump getting elected, is it's getting people a reason to start getting involved. Like they were maybe just on cruise control, and now they have to kind of slow down and go, okay, now I have to do some work here, like myself. And that's the thing I think people don't realize is we have a lot to work to do. We really do. We have so much work to do because in the last 70 years, if not more, I would say the labor movement has been slowly dismantled as well as like the old left communist movements. And those were the movements that were fighting imperialism head on in monopoly capital and thinking about an alternative to the current system that we have. And those have been dismantled through a lot of different reasons that we can maybe talk about in another podcast. But it shouldn't discourage people because it's like, well, that means you get to be I would say like the creators of of your own destiny here. Like we have to do it. No one else is going to do it. Yeah, I will. We were just discussing the protests, but
Yeah, something that I thought about too, a few minutes ago while you guys were discussing was this. It's something I'm kind of critical of, especially in like the like protests in general, is the idea of like people wanting to be activists but nothing more. Does that make sense? And let me kind of maybe try and explain that. So I'm not saying that like all activists are bad. I'm not trying to say that. But I do think that like we need to come at it from the angle of, when we talk about things like the anti-monopoly coalition, or like, an independent labor party kind of thing, we always talk about these things in the context of being led by labor, right? And that is something I'm always trying to like always remember, that it's like, these protests they're good to go to. I'm never gonna say like, oh, don't go to protests. That's dumb. But I think a lot of like activist culture is just going to protests, and that's it. I think there is kind of like a problem there in that, when people are like, oh, I'm an activist, like, well, what does that mean? It's like, oh, well, I go to protests. And, I think we need to be looking deeper and farther than just showing up at a park and holding up a sign, doing some chants, make yourself feel good and then go home. And the reason why I say this is because like there are activists that are also very influential, or they're very charismatic, right? Sometimes I fear that their charismatic nature is going to pull people in just this. I think we've used this term before, maybe not on the podcast, but I've heard it used by other people. The concept of movementism, and just this kind of activist culture, and we just kind of get stuck up in it, and just doing these same things. But that's what I am afraid of activists doing, is that if is pulling people into this mindset of like, well, we just need to hold more protests, and like,
yeah,
and
it is
then
kind of anarchistic, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and
It's
that's
just like
where
this
it's
direct action kind of mindset where you just have to be doing things and
yeah,
whatever it is. Felt like that with after October 7th, that we just have to be calling Israel like for what it is. It's a Zionist entity, which we don't
right,
prescribe to that ideology. We're for a two-state solution. But it just seemed like that everyone had to say that because how horrible of what was happening, and it was horrible. And we had to be in the streets and marching with like Hamas flags and stuff along with Palestine. It's like just doing that is more important than actually organizing and doing the work to actually change or actually to push for something like peace in the Middle East.
right.
And it is kind of like that idea of that movementism. If I sorry to interject there, but I felt like that was kind of where you were going with it.
No, and you're right. Like, and I had heard people say that same thing where it's like, why are we spending the time why are we spending all this time in, doing this or that, or doing organizing or doing building? It's like, we got to be out in the streets. We got to be out there on the streets every single day. It's like, okay, but you are missing the long-term picture. You're missing it for what's right in front of you, like right in front of your nose. Like, yes, this is ongoing. Yes, we need to acknowledge it, of course, but if we get so caught up in what's going on right now, then we can't build for the future. And I think this is also something I've thought about, when it comes to the genocide going on right now in Gaza, is this idea, so we've got people that want to be at protests all the time. We need to be at protests for Palestine, we need to be doing XYZ. When we've seen protests. We've seen protests with tens of thousands of people. And I'm not saying that that's bad. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. But what has all of these protests, all of this energy put into these spontaneous, I guess you could call them spontaneous actions? I mean, I would call, of course, they're very short-term actions, right?
Remember that strike against corporate America, basically, like the don't buy Target, don't
Economic
buy
blackout or whatever they called
economic
it.
blackout.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that is a prime example of this movementism kind of,
Yep.
because
Yep.
it's like be a conscious consumer. It's like I don't, they showed like, oh yeah, this actually affected Target, and they'll maybe consider bringing back their DEI program. And then what? You still got to go to Target and buy their overpriced products or something. Like they're going to still pay their workers crap. They're going to crush any unionization's efforts, but at least show them for that day.
Where I was kind of getting to with the excuse me, where I was kind of trying to get to with that point, though, is that people forget that, like, okay, so you got all these protests, but like, I feel like ultimately people being out in the streets and protesting, like, again, it's good, but if you want to stop Israel getting weapons, or you want to stop the genocide and whatnot, I think what probably the biggest, most influential thing you could do is organize the locations where they are building these weapons, organize those places, and then you hold some kind of strike or some coordinated action, so that way you at least see the weapons cut off from the source, from where they're being manufactured. I won't say that, of course there could be, a president, probably not Trump, of course, but something could have been signed, like a ceasefire, or if you put enough pressure on, the government, I think you could see that being used to sway the government to stop selling, weapons to Israel. I'm not ruling that out as a concept, because I still think that, like, yes, we have to keep our options right. We don't just want to discount any of them, so that is still an option. But I think probably one of the best or one of the most impactful things you could do is probably try to get into these manufacturing sites, organize the workers, organize them to strike, so that way the flow is actually cut off. So that's one thing that
And that's not going to happen. Like, just you walk in and you're like, hey, we should strike right now. Like, like that, there's that mindset too, that people just want to go in and they want something now. Like, they're like,
and that's where I feel like a lot of the protest culture is. It's like, well, we want something now. That's why we're going to go out in the streets now. It's like, okay, but we need to be doing something 6 months from now. Yeah. So what are we doing?
6 years from now.
Yeah, exactly. We need to be looking much farther than just what we need immediately, because yes, we do need reforms, or we do need things immediately, but we also need things in the long term. And I feel like if you trade one for the other, And that's where, that tightrope comes in, that balancing act, because if you trade too many things long term for short term gains, I feel like that hurts you. And if you trade too many short term gains for long term organizing, I think that also does hurt you a little bit. You got to have that balance of finding things to put pressure on now and also things to build for the future.
Right. And you can't do that yourself, which is why you need an organized party that can help
Exactly.
lead that.
Yep.
But
Yeah. And really, I mean, yeah, you need a party, you need lots of organization. That takes lots of work. It takes years of work to do that. I mean, even talking about things that I'm trying to do long term with like our local labor council, it's like, okay, well, I want to start trying to make more connections in surrounding labor councils, and
I
then
love hearing about your labor council struggles. It's like a drama novel or something.
oh, it's
It's so good. It's just hearing about like, oh, and the leader here is like part of this group. I'm like, oh man, this is great. But
but yeah, it's like long term, things that that I have, things that I think we need to do long term with like our labor councils and reaching out to other labor councils in like surrounding states, and then get them working together and talking to each other. And then you create almost like a federation of a federation, right? And then you get that group talking to other labor councils, and
yeah,
and it goes back to William Z. Foster's boring from within method.
that's great.
It's taking that method and doing exactly that.
And this is kind of a transition, but it's a great transition. So hold on a second. So like what we saw with Sean Fain and the was it UC the what's it
UAW.
UAW? Thank you. See
Yeah.
my acronyms, I get them all mixed up. I don't know if it's dyslexia or what, but anyways, with these tariffs that were thrown in the air, like let's see what sticks under the Trump administration, and his support of them, of these tariffs on Canada, Mexico, the world, um, and it's very short-sighted of Sean Fain, but I think it's so short-sighted because he's thinking of what he wants for his bottom line. And he wants to probably stay president of the union. I wish SM Safone was here to comment, but we know that these tariffs are so just like ham-handed that they're going to hurt consumers, which include the auto workers. But you saw what he did there, kind of showing support for it, because it does to some extent have some positives for workers when there are those tariffs, but it's just very, very short-sighted. And any sort of higher federation, of like an industrial union, perhaps amalgamated with other industrial unions, I don't think that president would make that decision. They would have to make a more nuanced answer, because they're representing more labor workers than just the auto workers. And I think that's what we're trying to get at when we say building federations, building like an amalgamation of all the different unions that kind of help make better decisions. And it's, there needs to be democracy involved in that, but it just seems very short-sighted, and that's kind of what I was trying to get at. I don't know if that makes any sense. But
yeah, so like I see, Fane's support of the tariffs is very strange, and like his justification of it is also just it's very his support of the tariffs was very strange, because I remember when he came out initially and he said, yeah, we support these tariffs. We don't support Trump for everything, of course. A lot of things that we don't support him on. And he goes, but these tariffs he thinks they're gonna help reverse NAFTA from the 90s, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which of course we don't have enough time to go into all that, but the thing that I think is funny though is he talks about like, well, we don't want foreign workers pitted against American workers, but we support these tariffs.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, but you supporting the tariffs is pitting American workers against other workers. What are you saying here? And so even like the tariffs got applied. And what was it 2 days ago? This is from Reuters. Stellantis to temporarily lay off 900 U.S. workers as tariffs bite. Like,
Right. And
and these are the people that he represents, is Stellantis workers, GM workers, Ford, in these are the people that are going to be affected by this. And he's trying to sit there and he's trying to like save face and
right.
give this very like, oh, well, tariffs are part of the toolbox of options. And
It can be, but not in this format, right? Like when you just slap tariffs all around the board on all industries, I really don't understand the strategy. I really don't. Like I don't
it's
honestly,
puzzling.
it's so crazy that I'm like overthinking it and I'm just like maybe they don't have a strategy. Like I think about like that the Signal Gate where they had all the people in the chat on Signal giving out like the coordinates of military strikes and whatnot. And I just think, why did they do that? I'm like, they don't know. They don't know what to do, and they're just doing things. I really am getting to that conclusion because or
Well,
it's
and
just to cause chaos. It's just the incompetency. But
yeah, and like as far as the industry that I work in, which is the electrical industry for people who don't know, these tariffs hit, and I remember I had another brother in our union. He told me it was like on Thursday, I think. He said that the contractor he works for, well, the supply house where we, for people who don't know, supply house is where you get like your copper wire and all the supplies you need. You would just order from a supply house and they ship it to you or they deliver it to you on the job site. The supply house told his contractor that copper prices are going up 30%, which is I mean, spool of copper, for 1,000 feet of 10 gauge copper, which is pretty common on a job site. I mean, that stuff is expensive already.
yes, that's what I was. Yeah.
But also, and that's why too, a lot of electrical contractors, as you pull copper in a building, you're gonna have excess, as you cut and you trim and you put stuff in, you've got excess wire, and they want to save that stuff because they want to fill up barrels full of extra copper, take it down, and they want to get that extra money because they know how expensive copper is. Well, now it's going to go up even more. And in my area, there was a builder. I don't remember the name off the top of my head. I think they primarily sell in like lumber in the area. They were already talking about the day of or even the day after the tariffs hit. They said, well, building's going to slow. People are not going to want to build houses or not even houses, just build in general. People are not going to want to build at these prices. So less people are going to be, getting lumber and building stuff, and I understand that, of course, under capitalism, we're always trying to build bigger and build more and build this and that. And like, I do, I understand that, but we also got to remember that, these tariffs causing a slowdown. Now people are going to get laid off from their jobs. So that's going to negatively impact everyone. And now you're talking about people getting laid off. Now all of a sudden groceries are more expensive. Now people are going to have less food to put on the table. They're not going to be able to afford as much. It's just it's going to be a vicious cycle. And and one more thing, and then I'll let you go. I watched a video yesterday, and this guy kind of talked about the whole idea behind Trump And Sean Fain even said this, which I don't understand where this logic comes from. Is that, well, if we slap enough tariffs on them, that these companies will come back to the U.S. and they'll start manufacturing in the U.S., which I am not optimistic that that is going to happen.
Yeah.
I do not see that happening. But this guy, I watched a video and this guy kind of said, he's like, you know, if you're a business owner, which again, I'm not, and I know we're all workers, of course, but in this situation, he was kind of saying like, okay, if you're a business owner and you're trying to bring production back to the States where it is, you know, objectively, it's expensive to manufacture stuff here. Of course, that's why it's gone overseas. He said that, you know, if you're going to build here where it's more expensive, where you're going to have to sell products more expensive, you know, you're going to want those tariffs to be in place at least, I don't know, years. So this idea that, you know, he said, if a manufacturer builds here and then the tariffs get lifted in like a year, well, the builder's going to be like, well, what the heck? I just spent all this money to manufacture in the States and now the tariffs are lifted. Why did I spend all this money, kind of thing? You know, I'm not trying to sympathize. I'm not trying to sympathize with, you know, the big capitalists, you know, in this instance. But I'm trying to kind of paint that picture of like, you know, now that the tariffs are in place, like basically Trump has to, you know, he's gonna have to pretty much go through with it. He's gonna have to be like 100% committed if he wants people to come back to the States for many years.
And I don't know if that's the goal. The thing is, you know, he could be very petty. There was a manufacturer increase in the U.S. It happened under Biden, and there were strategic tariffs put into place. He actually kept some of the tariffs from the first Trump administration, and specifically on the industry of chip manufacturing, like in our computers and whatnot. And that's why I think there's we brought this up, like, you know, like these big chip factories or industries that are being built in places all around the country. I think there was one in Syracuse, New York, and that was because, you know, America is getting beat against communist China in these in the fields of like AI and computer science and computer technology. And they actually did build up a bit of a manufacturing chip manufacturing industry in the US. But that's going to stop because now all of the tariffs are going to make all the parts expensive, like you were talking about, copper and everything. And so like I do, you know, but I'm not going to like sympathize with these chip manufacturing capitalists, because, you know, this idea of like the developing a free market or developing like one industry but keeping the free market, you know, we could see the contradictions in that, and we don't need to go into it, like the neoliberal kind of idea of a market. And you know, that's got its downfalls, obviously, but that wasn't the strategy at all. In fact, it's just like, I almost feel like it's because I don't understand the strategy. It's just like Trump is so petty that he saw something that a Democratic president did and just wants to destroy it. And I really don't know any other reason why that would happen. Because unless it's just to create chaos and then be able to take over when the chaos gets worse. That is it, and it's just something that simplistic. What I see.
It reminds me, I'll say this and then we'll probably have to close, but I saw a joke the other day regarding all the tariffs, and it went like this. It went, how to own the liberals. Step 1, tank the economy. That's the only step.
Yeah.
It's like that's the justification for, you know, for this is like, well, we're gonna own the liberals, like, you know, we're gonna destroy the economy so we can show them, you know, like
we all lost our jobs.
Yeah, but hey, at least
I got mine.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
that is part of it, but
Yeah.
I try not to digress into. I mean, I will say the thing that I did appreciate, it is petty a bit, that I thought was kind of funny was, there are these people that were at the protests. I think they were kind of like the counter protesters, and they just have giant signs that, that say like all these bigoted things like, God hates, like then they'll say the F word and whatnot. And there was a group, and I think they were actually, so I had to stand corrected. I think I said earlier I didn't see anything Palestinian stuff, but they were Palestinian organizers, and they were just right in front of the signs that said that, just like covering it. And I'm like, okay, that,
Yeah.
that was good. But
Fair enough. Yeah.
anyhow,
Well, yeah. Um, well, any closing comments from our panel today, Samya or Jerry?
we're a little, short, little small group today, but not in spirit. But hopefully we'll have our regulars. It's great that we have Samya here. I want to thank Samya for making it over here. We want to see more and get a view and have your insight because it's definitely valued.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a pleasure being on here, and I really enjoyed hearing the discussion.
So, View from Left Field can be found on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any other platform where you get your podcasts. And with that, I want to thank the panel for joining today and for this discussion. I hope you both have a great rest of your day.